The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
After Zoomies at the dog park, it's time for Drive Up at Target. In goes a big bag of kibble and one squeaky chicken toy for the good boy. Drive Up that's ready when you are, only in the Target app. Just tap Target.
Llegaron los nuevos McCrispy Strips, listos para aventurarse en la mezcla de mayo ketchup, la barbecue que quedó en el fondo de la cajita, hot fudge sundae y en la nueva creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Los nuevos McCrispy Strips, ahora en McDonald's. Para pa pa pa.
Hey everybody, it's Weird Islanders, the podcast, back once again. My name is Dan. That is Mike. How are you tonight, Mike?
I'm good. I'm excited. This will be a fun one. A good deep dive into a whole era of Weird Islanders. We've got this long list of players. We're never going to get through all of them. But we always joke about how different eras or moments deserve a podcast series or podcast of their own, and this one was a little bit of a stroke of genius, I think, to kind of do, because it sums up a very misunderstood couple years for the Islanders, and we have some very misunderstood players, I would say. Some are understood, but a couple of them are very misunderstood too.
Oh, definitely. And a few of them are just completely forgotten and have been completely memory hold, even though they did not play for the Islanders that long ago. And yes, this will be a fun trip down recent memory lane. And to do that, we're bringing on our special guest. He is one of the organizers of the Isles Meetup NYC group. We had a chance to talk at our meetup last year, and he's just an all-around great guy and a resident of New York City himself. He is Will Stevens. Will, how are you?
Hey guys, this is awesome for first time, long time. First of all, I appreciate the invite and the consideration. And as Dan, you mentioned, I was one of the people that talked in the long line of people that talked about Weird Islanders at the live show last year. But I could say that what I lack in the credentials of the hockey media guys and the media adjacent people that you usually have on this podcast, I make up for in time spent getting pizza in and around the area outside of the area in which we're about to talk about, or the era which we're about to talk about.
Well, no, that's great, because all right, so here's what we're going to do. At the end of all this, you could tell us what the best pizza places were around the area, and people can use that and go visit there as well. We'll get to the idea of this episode in a few minutes, but I'm just curious. The Isles Meetup groups do such a great job, no matter where they are, keeping people together, keeping Islanders fans together, no matter, what part of the country they're in or what part of various states they're in, where the Islanders may not even barely exist as an entity someplace. What is the sort of, I don't know about day-to-day is not really kind of the right word, but like, what's the sort of process that goes into kind of organizing a meetup, getting people's, getting the information out there, getting people there? And I mean, do you have any specific ones for this season? been kind of a trying one, but is there one that maybe stands out that maybe you guys had more fun at the meetup than the Islanders were probably having on the ice?
So I'll start with the last part of that, and this has been both a trying season, and for the four, so there's been basically we've kind of rotated people in and out, as because it's for people that live in the city, as you know, it's like there's a lot of transient people, and one of the first three organizers of the group had to leave because moved out, and now it's been a little tricky. Just because you said the teams had this ups and downs, and us mostly for good reasons, but most of the meetup people, at least the organizers, have had life changes. Two of them, myself included, have recently got engaged, and
congratulations.
One of them also had brought a child into the world, so we're all kind of been very busy in our personal lives. But yeah, certainly the priority to start kind of organizing meetups has been tricky. But I guess in terms of our process, and like it's kind of changed each season, because each season, we've had different places to go. We've had offside come and go twice now. We've jumped around the city here and there, and a lot of times, some meetup groups that exist, they kind of exist to serve specifically like the same group of people that kind of come in and out. But a lot of times our meetups are basically, it's a core, like, 8 people that kind of come in and out, and then usually we just, because it's the city, when you just get so many people that kind of work in the city, we just got to get people that just get interested and curious, and they'll drop in after work. So we've jumped around a little bit. We've gone to the Canuck once or twice, I think. We've gone to, obviously, Offside was probably our home base, and now that they're closed again, we're it's going to be a lot of figuring out. But I guess to that end, the best memories that I've had were, obviously, I think the late finals runs. Specifically, there was another bar that we were going to regularly that closed, and the Press Box, I think it was called, but it was in the Upper East Side. It was an Irish pub. They were very good. They were a very much an Irish, like, owned proper pub, and they were very good about putting the sound on. We used to get pretty big crowds in there.
That's cool.
So, and yeah, they just really like took in the culture very quickly, and were very accommodating, not just for like hosting, but also just like allowing Islanders to be like weird Islanders fans. And at a time when like it was a lot of juice behind it. So I'll always have very fond memories of every place that we've been to. Offside most specifically, but the other places too.
Were you? We probably have talked about this, but my favorite memory of watching the Islanders in the city was when they swept the Penguins.
Yes. Yeah.
Have we talked about that before?
No, we haven't talked about it, but I was listening back to the recent-ish episode of Weird Islanders that you did, and you were talking about Leonard, and you brought up the night that the water main broke in the basement of Offside. And then we all went up to
off the wagon,
off the wagon, yeah,
or something like that,
yeah. Oh gosh, that was so we were probably within like arm's length of each other because it was packed there.
Yeah, we might have hugged.
I'm sure we did. Yeah, and there was just so many fun little memories of that I don't even know if I can actually share on a podcast, but another time. But yeah, that was maybe actually one of the most my favorite like viewing memories. This is like pre meetups period, but like at that point, like anywhere, like I mean basically Offside was just like the big meetup at the time. Like it was, I mean, there were lines at the door for playoff games, just jam-packed shoulder to shoulder. And then to have that day where like everybody just basically migrated several blocks down Manhattan, like it was a parade going down. Everybody, like some from the city, some from the island, just like looking at their Maps app, trying to figure out how to get to off the wagon, which was like in that area, you have to kind of make a couple of zigzag turns and streets to get there. But once you got there, it was pretty clear what was happening.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Great night. Just
cool.
I'll never forget just that feeling of leaving that place. I think I said this on that episode. Just like leaving that place, Islanders sweep, and knowing you had like a full 2 weeks off was just the best. One of the best feelings as a fan.
That was the best feeling. And I remember that episode that we did of the podcast, and it's like, this is the most amazing feeling. And just sitting and just, okay, we've done this amazing thing, and we get to sit and exult in it. And then the other side of that coin, the other shoe drops, and you're like, this isn't as much fun sitting around. But no, but that's great. And I mean, again, to the work that all you guys do in the meetup groups is to like share those memories. I mean, I watched that game and that sweep at home, and I enjoyed myself. But had I been around other people, I'm sure I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more and had memories like hugging random people that then you end up talking to on a podcast like 7 years later. Like that's kind of crazy. That's awesome. We'll get back to Isles Meetups NYC throughout the episode, but in case you guys haven't figured it out yet, what we are talking about today is the Islanders' very weird Brooklyn era, which, if you can believe it, celebrates its 10th anniversary this September, which is completely insane. I don't know where time goes or how this came about. All of a sudden we're 10 years after that era, because I can remember it pretty vividly. And so we've got a selection of players here. We each picked 2. Will got 3. And so we're going to get to them and talk about how they kind of represent that era and why they're so tied to that era in our memories. But before we get there, I want to talk about this. I mean, this is when when Islanders Anxiety started, was that season when the Islanders first moved to Brooklyn, and Mike and I had attended a game, what we thought was the last year of the Coliseum. And then, we decided to do the podcast there. And after a summer of research, we started the podcast when the Islanders started in Brooklyn. And I don't know if we ever discussed or talked about our thoughts about like the announcement of the move leading up to the move. We had plenty of thoughts after the move, but kind of getting there. Will, I'll start with you. First of all, A, were you living in the city at the time? And B, when the Islanders made that first announcement, because remember, they announced they were moving to Brooklyn in 2013 during the lockout. And then they played the final season there, the half season and then the full season there, and then they moved. What were your thoughts at the time about that move to Brooklyn? Were you excited? Were you pissed off? Were you scared? What were you thinking at the time?
Yeah, so I think a little bit about said this in a truncated format when we did the live podcast, but I was a casual at the time. I was not super. I would watch. I would go to my when you live in Nassau County, you're mandated to try to get to at least like 1.5 games on average per season, which I did. And I lived in Freeport, so I at the time when they announced the move, it was weird and sad that they were moving out of the Coliseum. But I also living there, you knew everything that was happening with the referendum and all that stuff. And I was, that was kind of like the disappointment of them moving. It was kind of already out the door, because it was already a given that they had to go somewhere.
Right.
I don't remember the exact day when they announced it, but it was in the fall.
Yeah.
Because the next day, I went to a preseason Knicks-Nets game at the Coliseum because that was going to be, they announced it right before the Nets were going to officially become the Brooklyn Nets and do their home opener in Brooklyn. So I went to that Coliseum preseason NBA game, and just like they were doing a big like push for like handing out stuff, like telling people like, hey, like get ready for the Islanders at Brooklyn. And you couldn't find a crowd that would look at that notice with more confusion than that group. It was like partially Islanders fans who are mad about it, or Nets or Knicks fans that just simply could not care less. And I think that was a really good sign of things to come in terms of what the era was, and like what the vibe was going to be. It was a lot of things, as you guys have kind of talked about at the time. It was a lot of sort of being sold things that were kind of shoved down people's throats. Yep. And I guess there's other things vibe wise to get into, but that's where I was. I was living on the island, and then for like the 5 seasons they was there, the 3 middle seasons I was living in Crown Heights.
Nice.
So obviously, I guess what my experience was really like that the Barclays Center thing happened was what made me like very much in and out, day in, day out, follow the team and listen to you guys too. It was actually really important for me at the time to have the Isles Anxiety podcast, because it was really good to get grounded with the especially the perspective of somebody that's like still living on the island and having to like look out at Brooklyn and drive in and come into Brooklyn to go to games and get that like perspective on it. Because for me at the time, it was just like, well, I'm just gonna take a 10-minute drive, go 3 stops on the train and just go to the game and get a $2 ticket on StubHub or whatever. So
that's funny. Yeah. that was kind of my thing too. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, that's funny. So that makes you a member of a very small club of like people that really got into not that you weren't before, but like you really got into the Islanders after they moved to Brooklyn.
Yeah, and there was a good handful of them. The 17-18 year. I had a half season ticket package with a friend of mine who was a work friend, Clint, who I'll shout out here. But he moved to work in the city from Austin. We worked together at Apple at the time, and he was just trying to find a team to follow, and he was either the Islanders or the Rangers, and he figured that the Islanders were the Brooklyn team, and he lived in Brooklyn. So, and there's a handful of people a good amount of people that have that story to them, and they're cool. Just as weird as any other Islanders fan. They're just their route to get there is just different.
Right? Yeah, it wasn't tailgating at the Coliseum. Mike, like I said, I don't know if we talked about this beforehand, but like, where were you at the time, and that they made the announcement, and what were your thoughts? Because I mean, you were living on the island the whole time, so this was definitely going to be a big change for you.
Yeah, it was. Actually, I also want to just continue that point about how I think what's great about the Islanders is, and the fan base is kind of what you guys were just saying at the very end there, which is everybody's the way everyone kind of discovers or finds their Islander fandom. It is winding and weird. It should be a lot simpler, right? Because it's sports, right? It's pretty. Usually, it's hey, who does your family root for? Who's the team in your city? But when you're in a market with so many options, and you end up choosing the Islanders as like your team, it's very different from just growing up in near Arlington, Texas, and being like, I'm a Texas Rangers fan because that's where I grew up. A Texas guy. So it does. It's really interesting how the Islanders find people and get into their soul, because you'd think it's a lot more straightforward, and for some people it is, but it's usually it's not. It's some crazy thing happened in the universe and it broke that the Islanders were playing at the Barclays Center, and that now I'm a big Islander fan because I live there and tickets were cheap, and I saw this team and the fans, and I get it now. But where was I? I don't really remember, which is strange for me. I don't really remember where I was when the announcement was made, but at the time, so that was...
It was 2013.
13, right. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I had just, I was still interning with Stan, so I went to the press conference where they kind of were like going over the situation, and Charles Wang was there, and Mike Bloomberg was there.
Today, we are announcing that the New York Islanders will remain in the local marketplace as we have entered into a 25-year agreement, beginning with the 2015-16 season, to play in this state-of-the-art building called the Barclays Center.
I remember thinking to myself, this is so great that this is happening, because it means the Islanders are staying,
right?
At least for now. But I also, one thing I won't forget is that like when everybody left the lobby of the arena after that press conference, you could tell like 3 or 4 different pockets of conversation were going on, and they were all like, I give it 5 years. And that to me was like, yeah, this is the Islanders. Like it's basically a situation where this franchise has just kicked the can down the road. We'll deal with that situation the next day. And that's how the Islanders have had to survive until now, which is just let tomorrow's problem be tomorrow's problem, and let's just focus on keeping the lights on for today. And I just remember being relieved because we got to kick the can down the road a little bit longer,
right?
And keep the team here and not in Kansas City or wherever.
Right. Yeah. In retrospect, I should have seen it be like a kick the can down the road situation, but which of course it ended up kind of being. But at the time, I was at work, same job I have now, and I was just sitting in my office and probably wasting time. And all of a sudden, I was on Twitter, and I believe it was Craig Custance was the first to announce that the Islanders, he had heard that the Islanders were going to announce that they were moving to Brooklyn and play at Barclays Center, and I was like beside myself. Like I was like literally running around my office. I went to go talk to my boss, who's a huge Mets fan, so he kind of gets it. It's also from the island, and he was like, "Is this real?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is real." And I just remember not being able to concentrate on work for the entire rest of the day because my brain was going in a million different directions. How's this going to work? How are they going to do this? What are people going to say about this? Oh, wait, only, 2/3 of the seats have a view of the ice that people can use. That's another problem. They'll fix that. Don't worry about that. They'll fix that later. And the number one thing I thought of was, holy shit, I can go to games again. Like I immediately looked up how quick a subway ride was from my office to Barclays Center. I was like, 20 minutes? That's fantastic. And so I took in a ton of games there because, like you said, Will, you get a ticket at StubHub. It's like a couple of bucks. Jump on a subway and go. And I had my buddy Gio, who lives in the city, I'm going to get to a little bit later. And so I was super duper excited. I remember, and again, we did the podcast here. I remember being very excited that whole year that this was going to be great. And I remember, and I'm not kidding, and Mike, you will be surprised about this. There was, this was like a big story that day, people tweeting, about the Islanders, good, bad, LOL, or this is great. I remember, and I will never forget this, Ryan Lambert, of all people, tweeted, good for the Islanders. Just that was it. That was it. Just those 4 words. And I was like, wow, even he thinks this is a good move and he hates the Islanders. So this must be a good move. And of course, years would prove that it was a mixed bag, to say the least. But I can think about that day. I'm still thinking about it now and I'm laughing because I was super duper incredibly excited for what was to come. And I knew it was going to be tough. And there was a lot of people who did not like this and railed against it. But like you guys have said, this is what kept them here. I mean, like it or not, they had to get out of the Coliseum, and Brooklyn was better than Kansas City or Quebec or Hamilton or, location.
Lest we
X.
forget, with all the excitement going on before it kind of came into focus, the actual physical predicaments that they were kind of in by being in that building, that the one thing we got was from Long was that this was an ironclad.
Oh, yeah.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
That really...
The ironclad.
Yeah.
Ironclad,
5-year lease.
right. Oh, my God.
Yeah. It was not quite as ironclad as we all thought. But yeah, so many, many things that were very strange marked this era. And we've danced around it enough. We need to get to some players now who definitely categorized that era and represented that era. And Will, we're going to start with your picks here. We've got a forward, a defenseman, and a goalie. And in fact, it turns out sort of subconsciously, we ended up picking a starting 6 of players here, plus 1 extra forward, which I think is very efficient of us as hockey minds. And so I'm really excited to get to this first guy because I feel like he came around late in the Brooklyn era, but him and the defenseman you picked both definitely kind of represent that era. So Will Stevens, will you please reveal the first subject of tonight's episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast?
All right. The first subject is a center, and it is Chris Wagner.
That's right, Chris Wagner. And what I love about you picking Chris Wagner is that there are definitely people listening to this show right now that maybe don't go back this far and are definitely thinking, who the hell is Chris Wagner? Because that's the kind of player he is. So what about him specifically represents Brooklyn for you? Because this was one of the first guys we kind of couldn't settle on one guy, and that's how we kind of ended up with all these guys. But what was it about Wagner that really drew you to him in terms of like being connected to the Barclays Center era?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the next guy on the list, but I will say that, if you know that this guy came and he was the first of the 2 guys that was acquired kind of leading up to the trade deadline to try to support an Islanders team that was maybe kind of hanging in there, but was certainly showing signs of not being able to catch up in the race and was also banged up by injury. And this guy was, I guess in the year where we got the famous year where if you looked on Islanders Twitter at the time, you were just barraged constantly with Matt Duchene rumors to the Islanders. And there was a lot of hype. We didn't get that. We got Chris Wagner, who, and looking back, and you've kind of helped me spark some memories of him by finding some highlights. But I guess all in all, underwhelming, but fine, relatively. Not particularly great, and but nothing to really overcome the cynicism that was going to come from the fan base and just looking at this guy and the next guy too. But yeah, weird nonetheless.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's going to be a running theme through this episode of disappointing trade deadlines. And Chris Wagner is definitely part of that group. Mike, what are your memories of Chris Wagner? I kind of remember talking about him when they got him and just being like, yeah, all right, I guess. But I mean, what do you remember when you see the name Chris Wagner, New York Islander? What do you think of?
Yeah, that's kind of what I remember. I remember it being one of those weird trades that get made at the deadline.
Right.
There's usually like 4 or 5 a season. The Islanders made 2 of them this year, and I
Yeah.
won't spoil who the next
We'll
guy
get to
is.
the next guy, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like almost when a team that is out of the race acquires bodies for some reason,
Mm.
and you're like, why are you getting Chris Wagner when you're not going to make the playoffs? And I think about Rob Davison a little bit. When he got traded to the Islanders from the Sharks, became a legend pretty quickly. And then when Dean McAmmond was like thrown into that Chris Campoli trade, for sure too. Like, what is going through these guys' minds that their GM taps them on the shoulder and is like, hey, you just got traded. And they're like, oh, what to where? The Islanders. Well, what the hell's the point of that? And I feel like this trade, just generally, the Chris Wagner for Jason Chimera trade was
right.
It might have been, you know how in trade deadline you'll see like, we have one of the professional liars will be like, oh, we got to trade, and it's a doozy, and they're being tongue in cheek, and it's just 2 minor league guys. An AHL deal. Alex Barre-Boulet for Nicolas Aube-Kubel, something like that. And that's what this trade felt like. It felt like 2 teams announcing they just swapped like ECHLers.
Right.
Because it was just not going to have any impact on the league at all. At all. And Chris Wagner came. He threw his body around. But I remember him. I mean, he's still playing, obviously. But I remember him much more as an opponent than I do as an Islander, because it obviously was short, didn't do much, but he did. I felt like the Islanders were just playing him all the time after they traded him.
Yeah.
So, he's a strange one.
Oh, definitely a strange one. And I kind of Mandela affected myself a little bit because I could have swore I saw him play in playoff games for the Islanders, but then as I was doing the research, I realized, wait a minute, no, they didn't make the playoffs in 2018. so. I don't know what I was thinking that I thought he was a playoff player, but I'm glad you mentioned the man that he was acquired for. And Will, I think we might have to have you back on at some later point because I feel like we're going to need to do an episode on a guy who played a few extra games beyond sort of the Weird Islanders scope in general. But there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Jason Chimera was a Weird Islander. Like this guy, one of the weirdest.
If not Weird Islander, he's definitely essential Brooklyn Islanders like legend, ironic legend. Yeah, like essential guy to remember to understand like what was happening at the time and the place.
Exactly. The guy goes from scoring 20 goals, the quietest 20-goal season anybody had ever had, right next to his line mate or his occasional teammate Andrew Ladd, to having a season so bad that the guy he was acquired for, who only played 15 games for the Islanders, had exactly half as many goals as Chimera did in 58. So Wagner comes in, he plays 15 games for the Islanders. He has 1 goal, which, by the way, was a very nice deflection on a Johnny Boychuk shot.
With Hischier battling for the puck, it comes to Nelson. Batted down out of midair. Letty tries to settle. He does. Boychuk with a shot. They score! It was deflected past Kincaid. Hold on to your hat. It's a 1-goal game.
Instead of a 3-goal lead, it's a 1-goal lead with 3:39 left. The tip in front from Wagner. The shot from Johnny Boychuk, and Wagner plants himself in front. It's another tight one, 4-3.
The funny thing was that Chimera, who played 58 games for the Islanders that season, had 2 goals. two goals in 58 games for Jason Chimera. So we were a long way away from the secret under the radar 20-goal season. But it was when they traded Chimera, it was just funny because I was like, yeah, I guess. At that point, I was kind of so checked out on that team. That was not a very fun team to watch. That was the Tavares UFA year. They just refused to play defense. They could not stop a beach ball. I remember Andrew Gross writing that the Islanders were in the middle of what was the opposite of a playoff push. Like whatever they were trying to do, they were not accomplishing anything. And it was a rough watch. And by the time they traded Chimera, I was almost like happy for him that he had gone. He went to Anaheim, and I don't think he spent much time there. I think he just retired maybe afterwards.
Yeah, that was it for him. It's and I'll save some juice on Chimera in the event that you guys do another episode. But I will say that like that team, other than being yes, they were extremely horrible on D, right. But they also were also running gun and scoring a lot, which now is sounds foreign and weird to think about the Islanders since then. But and obviously Trotz came in the next year. They turned everything upside down, but they were scoring a lot. Like you also had several guys on this team that were in the double digits of goals, and
that was the Barzal season, the Calder season. So
correct.
He was putting up 80 points. Yeah.
And that Chimeric just couldn't even back into more than exactly one goal. Is really remarkable given how they were playing, and they were scoring. There's games in here. I was looking at the game log where they score 4 or 5 goals a night, which in the next couple of years to come, there were a stretch of 4 or 5 goal games. That just didn't happen. They were just unheard of for this group of guys.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that.
Just looking at that season, what's something we just never kind of mentioned. Everyone knows Barzal won the Calder that year and had a great season. It's still his highest points total, right? And
yeah. But
he outscored Tavares that year too, which is great.
Yeah,
it's just so funny to me that that's how that season went. Bizarre season with fire. They played some fire wagon hockey, and it just didn't make any sense in terms of X's and O's to anyone defensively. It's just so bad, and you have to look at it now in that context of. That season happened, and immediately after, the Islanders, Trotz came in and cleaned it up, and you're like, I wonder what we left on the table by not having a competent coach with that team, because they obviously had some scoring chops, and the team really didn't change that much. In fact, there was a huge deletion from the roster, from rather than something added, and the coach was able to just take them and be like, oh, if you just do this a little differently, you guys will be a lot better.
I don't know if we've ever fully processed that turnaround. We've talked ad nauseum about it. That was half of our episodes of Anxiety are about it. And God knows we've talked about it just amongst ourselves, but I don't know if we've ever, that needs to be a book, just the whole thing, right? Everything from this season, the 18 season where they played no defense at all, Tavares leaving, and then the Trotz turnaround. That needs to be a book or a miniseries or something, because that's remarkable. And of course, because it's the Islanders, nobody cared, and it never didn't really get reported anywhere outside of our own reporters and the occasional the Islanders, they play that tight defense. Dude, where were you guys last year when they played no defense? What are you talking about? You can't just slough that off. It's they play defense now. How'd that happen? But anyway.
This was the season that I was splitting the half season with my buddy Clint, and you mentioned it sort of, but we were calling it when we were going to games together. We were calling this cocaine hockey. This was just, and this will come up again when we talk about the next guy. But just absolutely no plan on defense. Plenty of fun stuff. I was actually just watching first season Calder Trophy year Matt Barzal highlights, and some of these goals are really spectacular looking.
Yeah, they're crazy. Also, I think we've come up with a title for this episode. Cocaine Hockey at Barclays in Brooklyn.
Oh god,
that's amazing. Real quick, Mike, you alluded to it before. So Chris Wagner is still playing. We're actually going to begin and end with guys who are still playing. No spoilers here, but he's currently playing for the Avalanche, who the Islanders actually just played a couple of days before we're recording this. And it's funny because Wagner went from being a very nondescript Islander to being a very kind of long time Bruin. He played for the Bruins for a long time until signing with the Avalanche just last year. And it's funny because I found a quote from when I did a search of Chris Wagner Islanders. I found a quote from him from the 2021 playoffs when he was with the Bruins playing against the Islanders and talking about how they play that, the Islanders play that tight defense and you just can't get any, and how the Islanders beat the Bruins that year by just never letting up and never letting them, get wide open for shots and stuff. And I just thought to myself, man, this guy must look at that team and be like, where was that team when I was here? This is not the same Islanders team that I played. I completely forgot he was with the Bruins at that time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is Chris Wagner is a very forgettable player. I mean, he's going to play more games in the NHL than I am, but I keep forgetting this guy's in the league. I don't know. He's just that kind of player.
I think that was my thought exactly when I was at one of the Bruins games in that playoff series. And I was like, we were watching just like kind of having banter and moments that we could where we could hear each other speak and the playoff atmosphere. But it was like, I was just having that, like reminding myself like, oh, it's that Chris Wagner. Holy cow.
Surely there must be, it's a pretty common name. You would think that there would be another Chris Wagner, but pretty funny. But he's not the only guy that the Islanders acquired in 2018. And we've teased this player enough too. So will you please reveal the second subject of tonight's episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast?
Next Weird Islander, defenseman Brandon Davidson.
So Brandon Davidson, unlike Chris Wagner, did come in with a little bit of fanfare. This guy was kind of a notable depth defenseman, got a lot of write-ups, was seen as a bit of a potential trade chip that year. And then if you're wondering, like, well, how come he got written up and Chris Wagner didn't? Well, the reason is because Brandon Davidson played in Edmonton and Montreal. So there were people actually watching him play as opposed to the Anaheim Ducks and Chris Wagner and the New York Islanders. And so Davidson comes over. First of all, it should be said, I didn't know this, honestly, at the time, and I feel a little bit bad. Davidson had survived testicular cancer when he was diagnosed when he was 21. And so he went on to have a long NHL career. So that's fantastic for him. I don't think I realized that because I didn't really pay much attention when he was with the Islanders. Davidson, in 18 games, actually outscored Wagner. He would have 1 goal and 1 assist for the Islanders in that same season. So Will, what was it about Davidson that stuck out to you? Again, this is a depth defenseman, not a high scoring guy, not a bruiser or anything like that. But as soon as you mentioned him, I immediately sort of pictured him and went right back to that trade deadline when I was just sort of like, that's it. Really?
Right. Yeah. That was both of these guys. They weren't acquired on the same day, but within a couple, 4 or 5 days, maybe between each other. And that was just it. Anybody in the arena or out at wherever you were going to watch games or outside, people were just saying like, oh, this is the reinforcements we're getting. Like after this is like months of just teasing of a potential Matt Duchene, who actually, by the way, just as an aside, when he got traded, it was, when he got traded off the Avalanche, he was in an Avalanche jersey, and there's footage of him taking off his Avalanche stuff, getting ready to go to his next team, go to Ottawa, right. And he's at Barclays Center because that's where they were when they made the trade. So and every time it just like added that much more insult to injury, and just like that. Yeah, that was it just night. And so but Davidson more so than Wagner too. Was like water when you are like just stranded in the desert in terms of like so he came in, there was I guess an expectation that like they just needed something on defense, and and I think in hindsight, like in a couple months when we got Barry Trotz, we realized that the issue with defense wasn't the players, it was the structure, and it was the fact that there was actually coaching that needed to be had here. I think there's a Letty quote, or maybe it's or is it anonymous? I might be attributing to Letty. It might be an anonymous quote. I think it was an anonymous quote that somebody was asked, a defenseman was asked, like in the next season in relation to the changeovers at Trotz, and somebody said like there was absolutely no plan or there was no coaching in 17-18. Like they were not receiving any coaching of substantial like value in that season, and it shows. I mean, obviously, but like so Davidson came on, and the thought was like at least like it was first like like this is it. This is all the reinforcements we're gonna get is these two guys, but it's also that like there was at least like some promise with like what he could do on the defensive end, and specifically like can we like stop having our goalies see like 50-60 shots a night? Can we do that for once? It'd be great.
Yeah, I don't know if Brandon Davidson was the guy to stop that, but it's a good theory, I guess. Mike, I kind of remember, and I hate saying this because it wasn't his fault, but I feel like Davidson became a bit of a punchline for us because of what we were just talking about, which is like, these are the reinforcements. Really, this is this is what we're getting here. And it became like for years later, it was like, oh, here comes Brandon Davidson 2.0, but I don't know. He wasn't a bad player by any means, but like Will said, they needed a lot more than one depth defenseman to fix what the hell was going on there.
Right. And if you remember back to that season, the Islanders were, they were in, I would say, worse case, like a worse situation than they are at right now. We're recording this like right before the Winnipeg, Minnesota, Northern Plains 2-step before the Four Nations face off. But they weren't like out of it. I would say at the time they were a few games over 500, but it was a situation where the focus was on what are they going to trade John Tavares or not, basically. And they kept saying no, and he kept lying and saying he didn't want to leave Long Island. Talk about a professional liar. And there was all this focus on that, and really, Luke catches a lot of grief for not wanting to cut bait with players and seems reluctant to sell. This trade deadline was pretty brutal on a lot of for a lot of different reasons. They I don't think that they had like create like a Brock Nelson type trade chip or anything like that, but they certainly could have made some moves to look ahead because the team wasn't going anywhere. But I feel like they were so concerned about the optics of that for Tavares, like, oh, we're waving the white flag. We don't want to piss him off, that they kind of went with a half measure of trading for these two, just literally just for warm bodies to get them through the season, and almost like half-assed, like, oh, we're still in this. We're still trying to win and going for the playoffs. And then they ended up going on a brutal streak. They won like one out of like the next 10 or 12 games after the trade deadline. And everyone was like, yeah, that's why we should have tried to get something for, I don't know, Dennis Seidenberg or whoever was kicking around at the time that they could have turned into something for down the road. I'm sure that there were a few players that they could have got more than Brandon Davidson for. And because there was the beginning of a young core there with Barzal, Beauvillier having a pretty promising season. He scored 20 goals that year. This was like Will kept saying, like, this was a pretty good team. Brock Nelson had a by his standards now, not a great season, but he started to like show chops as like a third line center at the time who could score 20 goals. There seemed to be a core developing that they could have kind of supplemented with the right moves, but they decided to not go that route and instead getting Davidson and Wagner. And in my recollection, Davidson came with like the reputation of almost like what Shane Prince came with a couple years before. You're not going to be wowed by his counting stats, but this is a good like analytics darling guy, a good project to work on, and the Islanders could have bought low. But him and Chris Wagner both they contributed 2 goals between them, so it didn't really work out for the Islanders. But it was just it reminds me a little bit of like the Sebastian Kohlberg, Thomas Vanek trade deadline where Snow just didn't seem to have the right plan in place, and his plan A, B, C, D was all one plan, which is just keep Tavares, and it showed, because this was a pretty terrible trade deadline. The Islanders just didn't move forward at all.
I wrote it down here that I think this is when the Garth Snow experience, like, officially, if it hadn't already jumped the shark.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And that's funny too that you mentioned Garth there, because I was thinking that it's so funny to me that Garth started his GMing career in the 2006 season, and at that trade deadline in 2007 hit an absolute grand slam. Like, he not only swooped in and stole the guy who everybody was trying to get, but he did it by giving up absolutely nothing and sparked the team, and, went on to this crazy playoff run and everything. And that was the absolute highlight of every trade deadline that Garth would have for the rest of his tenure with the Islanders. Like, obviously they missed the playoffs a lot. But then when they started making the playoffs, it was guys like Chris Wagner Brandon Davidson. Like, I don't even remember who else they got at the dead. Tyler Kennedy was one guy. I think we're going to talk about another guy later on in this episode that they got at the trade deadline. Like, where are the Ryan Smiths of this era? Right. They didn't exist. Like, he just wasn't going out there. And I think, Mike, you're 100% right. Like, this season was all about Tavares. Everything was about him. And then until it turned into being about Barzell. But when it wasn't going well, and it was, they hung around long enough that you thought, okay, listen, if you guys can figure out how to stop a puck every once in a while, you can get in the playoffs and maybe do something before this guy checks out. And they just never did. And so it wasn't a total loss until probably February or so when the wheels came out. They ended up having like an 8-game losing streak, I think, in March. And that was the end of it. And then things started getting real bad. And then we started hearing about like, wow, he really likes Snow and Waite. He wants them to stay and he'll sign if they stay. And it started getting real gross until he eventually just left. And, even getting Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello in place wasn't enough to keep him. But Brandon Davidson, not Garth Snow's best trade deadline moment, to be sure. He did look like a solid. You're right about the fancy stats. He was, again, he played for the Oilers. So like those guys were making up stats left and right to, look at with those guys. And so the Islanders did have a rash of injuries again, which is a shocking thing. They never did that. That never happens to the Islanders, right? He did have a goal, and it was against Islanders anxiety favorite Tristan Jarry, which is a very funny thing to have found out in doing my research.
For Davidson up on the rush, the backhand, he scores! Tristan Jarry fell over as Davidson was going to the backhand, and a freebie for the Islanders here early.
I'm not sure if his skate got caught in a rut down near the front, because that's what it looked like. He got stuck on his right side and just completely fell over. Davidson was just trying to throw the puck across the top of the crease as Anders Lee was going to the net. The good hard pass all the way across to Davidson, and you can see the balance, and he just never is able to regain his balance as he was going from right to left. Surprised he hasn't checked his skate a little bit. I mean, you can see the awkward position.
But more importantly, and I got to thank, I think it was Eyes on Isles for pointing this out when I was doing the research. Brandon Davidson scored one goal officially for the Islanders. He did, however, score 2 own goals against the Islanders on back-to-back nights. Once against the Florida Panthers, right off his skate. Hey, I mean, it happens. What are you going to do?
That pass got through everyone and on goal, so there's no icing. Dadonov right through to the crease. It banked in off the skate of Davidson, and it's a 3-0 lead for the Florida Panthers.
And there's why you shoot the puck, Brendan. A harmless-looking play. Dadonov just fires it through the top of the crease. Davidson's coming back hard. Florida Panthers able to get it. You can see Dadonov just wires it hard right to he's in perfect position. Bukestad's driving towards the net. Davidson's got it, but it goes right off his skate and into the empty net.
And then the next night, a beautiful tip-in past Yarrow Halak, who was his own goalie, while they were playing the Ottawa Senators.
Good forecheck by Eberle, forced the play right into Beauvillier's lap, and they tip it through the legs of Halak. It was Davidson trying to poke it away.
Driving through the net, and just a little tip by Davidson.
So I thought that was really funny, and I got videos of both of those here. You should definitely check them out. The goal against Tristan Jarry, though, is a pretty funny one.
Beautiful, no notes.
Yeah, great. But yeah, Brandon Davidson, 18 games played, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points for the Islanders in 2018. And now a word from our sponsors. First is always VintageIceHockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, and more featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey now carries a full line of Islanders Anxiety merch featuring our blue and orange brain logo, as well as our Al Arbor and the Island shirts. And as always, our portion of the sales go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. That is VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a Rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a Top 100 Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly. There is one other man who Will has selected here, who possibly more than any of the ones that we're going to talk about today represents the Brooklyn era of New York Islanders hockey, perhaps better than anybody, because it was weird as hell. And so, Will Stevens, will you please reveal your final selection for this episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast?
Another cursed roster criticism product. Goalie, Jean-Francois Berube, JF Berube.
That's right. JF Berube, the man who was coming off of a Calder Cup championship in the AHL. People thought the Islanders had scored a coup, getting this fantastic goalie off of waivers just at the right time, at the right moment. Kings, already had John Quick. They didn't really need any other goalies, and this was the Islanders' chance to grab a man who could possibly anchor them for years to come. What did they do with him? They sat him on the bench and in the press box for almost 2 goddamn seasons. Will, I'm not even going to ask because I know exactly why you picked Berube, but when you see the name Jean-Francois Berube, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it a guy sitting on the bench in a hat? Is it the smell of popcorn? What's the first thing that really pops into your head when you think of this guy's name?
Roster construction is the first word. Yeah, so you wrote down some notes and highlights here. I was at the first JF Berube start.
Wow.
And remind you this. I'll remind you that it was I was a casual at the time, so I was definitely in the phase where I would go with some friends, whatever year it was, even in the Coliseum, and I would have somebody would sit me down and just kind of catch me up on what was going on with the team and the roster and the things to know, what's going on with Alexei Yashin. Is he, what's the back page of the Newsday? Why is he on a milk carton? Things like that. But so when I went to this game, and this was this is when I started really kind of picking up and going to a lot more games, but I sat with my friends, Kevin and Jack, and they actually they were wearing the black jerseys. They were doing Queens night for some reason. So they thought they're both Queens guys and they're both Islanders fans. So they figured to go. I went with them. And it was also Nick Leddy bobblehead night. But
oh wow.
But I had to, what I'm getting to here is that I was basically had it explained to me at very lengthy detail what was happening and why JF Berube was here, why they had 3 goalies. And I realized at this point, it hadn't really fully clicked with me yet, but that Garth Snow was absolutely just in full on galaxy brain mode in this one. That he to actually trick yourself into making your roster worse. Right. And also to actually screw over a player specifically in the process of it is again, we just mentioned scoring more own goals than regular goals. This is the same level of hubris right here.
I mean, it definitely is. I think Garth overplayed his hand. And Mike, I know we didn't talk that much about Berube at the time because there wasn't anything to talk about because he was sitting in the press box. And it's so funny to me that this became almost like a cause celeb, as they say. And there was one podcast at the time, a very notable hockey podcast that took it upon themselves to talk a lot about Berube and why he was sitting and, why your friends explained to you, Will, that, here's why this guy starting is really weird because he hasn't started. And it was just so, I didn't even really know where to even begin because it's they picked him up because Halak was hurt. And then almost as soon as he's here, Halak is suddenly miraculously good again. And they just didn't want to put Berube on waivers because they were afraid they were going to lose him because he came with this big, resume and the Calder Cup championship and everything. So they hung on to him and hung on to him and hung on to him. And before you know it, a whole season goes by and he only plays in 7 games. They sent him down to Bridgeport, but only on an emergency recall so that they didn't have to actually put him on waivers so that nobody could pick him up. But then he had to come back and play because you can't just emergency recall a guy, send a guy an emergency loan and then bring him. He's got to play. So he ended up playing 7 games that year. And then I think he re-signed. And then he was sitting there again for more time. And he got into 14 games the next year, but still that's not a whole lot because they still had Greiss and Halak at the same time. And it wasn't until halfway through that second year that things really started to fall apart because Halak was complaining about splitting the time. And worse than Halak was a guy you really don't want to get on the bad side of, Halak and Berube's agent, Alan Walsh. And so I remember us, this is again during the time we were doing the podcast. We didn't talk about Berube that much because we couldn't. There wasn't anything to talk about. But when Alan Walsh started getting involved, that's when we were kind of like, okay, this is stupid. Like, this whole thing has been stupid. Just put the guy on waivers. Who cares at this point? Because, like, you kind of start to feel bad for the guy that his entire prime of his career had just kind of gone up in popcorn smoke. Like, he's just sitting in the press box eating popcorn while everybody else is playing. It's really weird. But, like, where do you come out on the Berube thing? I mean, I remember Walsh talking about it and stuff, and this brought up back a lot of bad memories. But, like, it was just such a strange. This is one of all the strange things the Islanders have done. This has to be one of the top 10 strangest of the last 20 years or so.
Yeah. When you think of weird Islanders, like, to me, the poster child, like the first image that always comes to my mind is Chris Osgood, because Chris Osgood is a Detroit Red Wing who when people see Chris Osgood in an Islanders jersey, they'll be like, well, that was weird. Like, I didn't remember. I don't remember Chris Osgood playing for the Islanders. So there's that kind of weird Islander. And then there's this, which is weird things happening to a player or because of a player on the Islanders. And this is so strange, and we'll put it right. Like, I think Snow was really caught some galaxy brain, like smartest man in the room syndrome.
Yep.
With how he was handling this. And what was very frustrating for us, I think this is how we kind of talked about, we're like, this guy's taking up a roster spot. They can just move on from him because they're creating a problem where they don't have one. If you remember that 2015-16 season, Greiss and Halak were fantastic. Like, they were really good. And Greiss especially, they were just a really good tandem that season, and they kind of blew that up and like caused a problem. I mean, Greiss stood on his head and stole that playoff series from the Panthers, and they created a really strange problem where there shouldn't have been one over JF Berube. Like, this wasn't Patrick Waugh or like Jacques Plante. It was JF Berube. And the other thing I'll say here is, it's also like the Islanders would get piled on for it, and Berube became like a hockey hipster kind of joke. But nobody else was carrying three goalies at the time either. Right. But nowadays it's more common, and like maybe Snow kind of saw some sort of trend coming with the way that like roster construction was, and he was both very behind on the times and ahead of the times at the same time. It felt like Garth, like he was the scrap heap guy, like the first guy who was using the waiver wire in like the salary cap era to pick up young, hungry guys like P.A. Parenteau, who Molson, those kind of Thomas Hickey that were going to be hungry, cheap, and you knew would commit to the cause because it could be their last chance of sticking in the league. But then he would do stuff like this where you're like, yeah, I get what you're trying to like outsmart everyone, but it's not working. It's clearly not working. This team doesn't need this. And it, as you said, it all blew up in that next season. The 15-16 season is so memorable for so many reasons. And that 16-17 season is just really forgettable. Like, it's they were okay. Like they were in the playoff race. But everyone kind of just petered out a little bit, and it was
the year they fired Jack Capuano.
Yes, the Capuano
took over second half.
Right. Yeah, and it was just like a weird season that kind of just like I don't have any distinct memories from it on the ice. I'm sure like if we sat here and talked about it, I could think of some, but off the ice I do, and this was one of them. The Alan Walsh thing, Halak going down to Bridgeport, and everyone being like, "What the hell's going on with this?" And it was just a very nondescript, did it even happen season for the Islanders, despite the fact that they did finish on 94 points. Like they had a really good finish. They played really well under Doug Weight. People forget that that he took over midway through the season.
They only missed the playoffs by like a point, right? Or
yeah, they
like
did.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just very weirdly constructed season. And you think that if Snow doesn't handle Berube this way, because he was not good this year, and Grice and Halak once again were, the Islanders maybe make the playoffs. You said like they missed by a point, and Berube started 7 games, won 3, lost 4. So you just never know if those starts went to Halak or Grice.
They could have made the team better, but you have to remember, if you have a chance to actually actively make 2 players on your team that are cornerstones of the team really mad, and also their agent, who's one of the most powerful people in the sport. Yeah. Anytime you have that opportunity, you have to take it. So as a GM, you got to do it.
Powerful and online, two very dangerous things. But Will, you have experienced another thing that you remember a very, very small club in. You were there for JF Berube's first actual NHL win.
Centering feed to Koivu, and a kick save made by Berube. And for the goaltender, JF Berube, in his second National Hockey League game, it's his first NHL win.
The Islanders snap a 3-game skid at the hands of the Wild with a 5-3 win on Tuesday. And Jean-Francois Berube records 40 saves to pick up his first career win. The Isles' 5 goals were scored by 5 different players, including Brock Nelson's team-high 20th of the season.
He was like, I mean, again, it was like just quintessential of the period, because they were wearing the blacks, the black jersey. They were. It was a game against the Wild. It was like you couldn't pick 2 more polar opposite jerseys than like just like wearing absolute like gothic black and like literally the like big old colorful like everything bear that they wear on the Wild jersey. And pretty exciting game. 5-3 was the final. And I think, what was it? He let up the goal first, but then it was just, I mean, all around just really good showing. I think there's a Brock goal in there, if I'm not mistaken. But Berube, like, looked like fine. Like, I guess when I was watching the game, and I was being explained to me why he was on this roster, it was sort of being told to me that like Garth sees something special in this guy, and that's why he has to be held up in the roster, and why they're doing the weird move of carrying 3 goalies. And I'm watching this, and it's, in any one game, any goalie can have any sort of game. I mean, good or bad goalie. But I was watching this, I was like, this is fine. I'm not like, there wasn't a moment in this game or any games going forward where I sat and watched JF Berube and I said, this is a guy that you need to like protect, like he is like he's some like prodigy. The sadder thing is that like Berube is like, as a goalie, was fine. Like, you watch this game, you watch highlights of it, and he's fine. Like, and I'm like, as an armchair amateur scout, I'm not like sitting here watching JF Berube games and saying, oh, that was the one that got away,
Yeah, seriously, that was the thing. I was, every time he played, which again was very rarely, I was always like, why are we doing this for this guy again?
Right.
Like, it's just,
it's just so in another sport, he might, I mean, like, the funny thing about the whole thing in this, especially the second season, it's like, I feel like in another sport, like, couldn't he, like, there would always be a cause for a grievance to have,
right,
basically just be wasting away. Like, I always make this probably, sorry, my first baseball analogy here, but like the Mets general manager, Billy Epler, like a year or 2 ago, was fired because he was doing sort of something similar, but with injury list and keeping guys down to stash them away so he didn't have to leave them open for waivers. And like, granted, like, if you're using the injured list, it's a little different, and like, you're technically can keep the guy like on the team, but like that Garth Snow actively knew like that these guys were upset about this and then still like kept them around is just like, it's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. I think Garth at some point, Garth was just like, I'm just getting my jollies off with this. and he felt Garth was this was the end of his tenure, obviously, a couple years left. And I think Garth had a pretty big sense of invincibility of himself, because he was there so long. He was Charles Wang's guy, and you weren't going to find someone else who kind of understood the inner workings of the Islanders and how you had to operate within the Islanders system than him. But he was flat out wrong on this one, and Berube you feel for him. You wonder if the Islanders kind of, as you said, kind of screwed him a little bit with the way that his NHL career got started. But we, as the fans, seem to know more in this situation, or know better in this situation than the GM, and it bears out in the way that his career then reads afterwards, which was that the Islanders paid Vegas to draft him in the expansion draft.
Yeah.
They cut him 10 days later. Then he's like going two-way deal. He's in Chicago, traded for basically nobody a year later to Columbus, Philadelphia. At one point in the notes here, it says traded from Philadelphia to the Rangers for unknown compensation.
Who knew?
Right? Like, this is crazy. Back to Columbus. Next thing you know, he's released by Florida, signed by Florida, released by LA, and that's it for him. So like you look at, it's not even, it's the tour, but it's the bus tour more than anything. And you just wonder if this completely unforced error that now this player represents doesn't go that way, just how much could have been different, because the Islanders could have made the playoffs in 16-17. That would be 2 in a row. Now the team has some momentum. Maybe the new building's a little bit more jammed up and whatever. And the guy who they drafted before Victor Hedman doesn't leave. Who knows? And it's very, very. It's a dangerous game to play. But had Garth Snow not got into this like clash of the egos with Alan Walsh and tried to outsmart everyone with JF Berube of all people, where the Islanders are probably have a very different history, which is crazy to say about a player who played 14 games for them total or something like that.
Well, it was 21. 14 in one season, 7 in the other one, but close. Yeah, it was. This was a very indefensible thing. Like when people used to be like, why are they doing that? I have absolutely no idea. I don't know. I mean, Berube played 261 games in the AHL after he left. So, I mean, it wasn't like he just stopped playing, but he's got to probably wonder that too. And I mean, apparently he had a pretty good sense of humor about the whole thing. He talked about it once he went to Chicago, but you could tell that, it was a little bit, I think, touchy for him. And yeah, the Vegas thing, I'm glad you brought it up, because it is funny that they ended up trading a first round pick, Mikhail Grabovski, Jake Bischoff, a defenseman, I think, and then another pick just to get the Golden Knights to take Berube, and who was then just immediately cut. And that pick, by the way, and I've mentioned this before on Anxiety, is defenseman Eric Brandstrom, who's still around. I think he just got traded to the Rangers, actually, didn't he? For in the JT Miller trade. So like the JF Berube still kind of continues to haunt the Islanders in the form of Eric Brandstrom. He's still out there. I don't know where Jake Bischoff is these days, but it's this was a very, very strange thing. And the good news is, and we love to find happy endings on this show, is that he is back in Southern California. JF Berube is, and he is the director of goaltending for the Anaheim Junior Ducks. So he can teach these kids about playing, he can teach them about sitting, and he can teach them about how, one is better than the other, I guess. But yeah, Will, this was a great selection of players here, one for every position. And did these guys prepare you for the years to come as a more hardcore Islanders fan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think this set the scene. Watching as I'm like learning about the Islanders, I'm just watching in front of me all the things happen with JF Berube's weird roster situation and the Wagner Davidson pickup at a trade deadline, coming up on a trade deadline where Garth was clearly airmailing it in for the sake of trying to retain Tavares for some reason. And suddenly every time now I go in, in the future and then discovering things in the past that happened with the Islanders, be it through listening to other episodes of Weird Islanders or just going down Wikipedia rabbit holes with this team. And you just see maybe not so much the same thing that JF Berube have specifically, but just again, just weird deadlines, bad deadlines, and just overall things that just drive, again, cynicism through the fan base in a way that I can't really describe. It's just, it's perfect. It's Islanders. And I think, just because they weren't on the islands proper, these guys, they really exemplify the Islanders way in the worst parts of it.
Well said. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it is funny how, you get drawn in with these guys, but we're not done. We still have a whole bunch more guys. And now we get to the Leboff selections here. A couple of other forwards that showed up as free agents. So now we've moved from the sort of trade deadline section to the free agent section. And this is, of course, where the Islanders always do some of their weirdest work, right? These guys show up in July and why did you sign here again? So Michael Leboff, will you please reveal your first selection for tonight's episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast.
Yes. I will start with a man who played his college hockey at the University of Calgary, then played an extensive career in the minor leagues. Yeah. We don't root for teams. We root for players on this show for each. That's Bracken Kearns. He of 4 games for the New York Islanders across 2 seasons, 2 in one, 2 in another. Just great name. Yeah, his dad was an NHL player from the late 80s, early 90s. But this guy, what I liked about Bracken Kearns and why he stuck out to me was because he was the type of guy that I just always assumed was going to work. Because as we talk about, Snow had a way of finding a guy like this every season, it seemed like, from whether it be someone with a high pedigree that wasn't clicking like Michael Grabner or Thomas Hickey, or someone like Matt Molson who finally looked like he was putting stuff together in the minors. And I think we might give Garth a little bit too much credit for doing that, just because it worked. It did work for him early on, and then it kind of stopped working. And we maybe have just assumed that he still did it because, it didn't really work out for him much in the the Brooklyn era. But I thought for sure that Bracken Kearns was going to be the guy that was like a really good spark plug, a bottom sixer, with nothing else to lose, crash bodies. But he just did not do that. He was not. He was long in the tooth too at the time. Like he was like 34, 35 years old by these times the season started. So, but it was a good story for that, like that he got to keep playing. But a completely as much a footnote in New York Islanders history as you can find of any player, Bracken Kearns is.
Yeah, Kearns had the most sort of surprising things about him in doing the research. One was that he was 34 when the Islanders signed him, which I was shocked to find out because I thought he had been around forever. And it turns out he had been around the AHL forever and in the NHL for only 3 seasons, and had really only played extensively for the Sharks the year before. He played 25 games for them, and then he had a cup of coffee with the Sharks the year before, and then he played a little bit with the Panthers before that. So I thought he had been around a lot longer, but turns out he hadn't. The second thing that I thought was surprising was that he only played 4 games for the Islanders. 4. That was it. I could have swore he was here up and down for like the better part of 2 seasons, like coming out from Bridgeport and whatnot. But when he only had 4 games, I was completely blown away. I'm like, no, why did I think he was on this team a lot more? And then I just realized that I think that roster had a lot of quote unquote Bracken Kearnses on it, right? Like just dudes that were in the bottom and kind of cycled in and out and whatnot. I mean, this would have been in the 2015-16 season. So the first season in Brooklyn, they signed him on July 2nd that year. Will, I'll throw it to you real quick. I know this is still early in your Islanders tenure, but do you have any recollection of Bracken Kearns at all? Is this a name that popped out to you, or is this still a little bit too early for you? I mean, he only played 4 games, so if you don't remember, I wouldn't be surprised.
No. I kind of vaguely remember him in the 16-17 season because I was, again, kind of going a little bit more frequently at that point, just seeing him as a guy coming up, but like not enough to like have any strong like thoughts or feelings about the guy. Listing off of just the teams, it's just really fun to think about like the stories that this guy has. It's like Cleveland, Milwaukee, Norfolk, Rockford, San Antonio, Worcester, like Bridgeport, just like a where's where in AHL towns that you could be in, like but yeah, just absolutely just memory hold this guy until I saw him on the list here.
And as Dan said, like I thought the same thing. I thought that this guy was like, because I remember hearing his name with the Sharks. I could picture him in that Joe Thornton kind of style Sharks jersey with the turquoise shoulders, and then like the number in the front, the little number in the front.
Yeah.
But this is I was wrong. Like I thought he was be more akin to like what Chris Wagner is now, just like a guy who's a NHLer who just signs like the 1-year deal and kind of just goes around, and maybe he goes 2-way deals for a while. But when just doing research here, I was so surprised with how little he actually played in the NHL, and that I I thought that this guy had much more than a cup. I mean, he played 25 games with the Sharks one season, 2013-14, and maybe that's why I remember. I'm like, oh well,
yeah,
he must have just been around, but no, he played total of 35 games in the NHL.
I don't know why I thought he was a much bigger deal than I expected. But again, I think that he just fits that mold, and like you said, I mean, you expected him to be a Chris Wagner. I mean, if you told me Chris Wagner was Bracken Kearns and vice versa, I'd probably believe you. They're kind of cut from the same cloth. Another thing that's funny though is he only had one assist as an Islander, so he did have a point, but I couldn't find a record of that. However, in a Weird Islanders the podcast first, I did find video of the Weird Islander in question taking a completely worthless penalty, the slashing penalty against the Flyers and Radko Gudas. Now, listen, I'm in favor of always slashing Radko Gudas, but this was at the end of, like, I don't know, they were getting blown out and Gudas had hit him, I guess, and he slashed him. And
Kearns comes to center.
I would love to watch him play against Ovechkin in the series. I think that would be pretty good.
There was a Gudas hit that no one in the world expected. Kearns just gives Gudas the stick. Gudas, well, since I guess it's going to be Kearns who's going to get the penalty.
Yeah.
Because none was called on the Gudas hit. And, it's just surprising in this game when nobody's throwing that kind of body check that Gudas decided to. And it winds up costing the Islanders a penalty to Kearns with 9:01 to go in the third.
This was a worthless penalty. Maybe this is why the guy only played, 30 whatever games in the NHL all that time. But like Will said, man, what a tour of the AHL. 732 games in the AHL. Like we said, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Norfolk, Rockford, San Antonio, Worcester Sharks, not the Railers, Bridgeport, and then Binghamton. That's the other thing too about Kearns is that he might have only had 1 point in 4 games as an Islander, but he was an absolutely killer sound tiger. He led them in points and goals and everything that one full year he spent down there. And he ended up getting a second deal out of it. So, I mean, he found his niche, which was in the AHL really. But he never really kind of graduated to the AHL, to the NHL. And I mean, I don't even know if we would call him a quadruple A player. It seemed like he was basically just a straight up triple A player. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But somehow he found his way to the island. And I would love to, we got to make it. I don't know if the Wade Dublowitz ship has sailed yet, but if it has, we got to try and get Garth Snow on the show. I don't know. He asked him, and I just want to ask him, Bracken Kearns, why? And just like hear what he has to say. Probably just for Bridgeport. Was
on the show or as an intervention? That's
one or the other.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 110,000 bonus miles for a limited time through July 16th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends 7/16/25.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
It's summer. Time to enjoy long days, lazy nights, and great food. Because Uber Eats has deals all summer long. So, when hunger strikes, don't sweat it. Delicious deals are just a tap away on Uber Eats. Enjoy all your favorite grocery items delivered straight to you. Get ice cream, soda, and snacks from your favorite stores like Wegmans and CVS and make the most of every moment. Now that sounds like a good summer. Order now on Uber Eats. Terms apply. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast. The NBA playoffs are here, and Michelob Ultra is getting you closer to the game than ever with courtside seats and more. Enter now at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access Courtside 2024 to 2025 sweepstakes. No purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Ends on July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/superior access/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Bracken Kearns is not the only forward, AHL forward for that matter, that Mike has on his list here. So, Michael Leboff, will you please reveal your other selection for this episode of Brooklyn's own Weird Islanders, the podcast?
Yes, and there is a method to the madness why I chose Bracken Kearns, and that's because I wanted to juxtapose him with my second selection here. Another guy who played for both the Sound Tigers and the Islanders, but a very, very different career and path, and that is former first-round pick, a player who was traded in a really big trade at the time for Brian Campbell. His name is Steve Bernier.
That's right. Now, we might as well just get this over with. Steve Bernier's moment of infamy did not come as a New York Islander. In fact, it came as a New Jersey Devil at the worst possible time to have a moment of infamy. That is in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final, when he boarded Rob Scuderi, took a 5-minute major and a game misconduct.
Stoll just drilled Giunta. He's getting up slowly. And now a penalty at the other end. Bernier.
It'll be against the Devils indeed. And a King player, Scuderi, is down on the ice hurt and hasn't been able to get up. There's a penalty on the play, and Peter DeBoer isn't very happy about it. He's talking to the referee.
Well, he's not happy because should have been a Kings penalty he felt before, as Stoll got Giunta from behind. Here's the play he's talking about, away from the play, a late one.
Late, a little bit from the side, and here's what happened to Rob Scuderi as he got drilled by Steve Bernier, and he's still not up.
While he was in the shower, the Kings scored 3 goals in the same penalty en route to their first Stanley Cup, and he's been carrying around a lot of this baggage because of that. You know, it happens, whatever. But somehow after that, where does Steve Bernier decide to pick up the pieces? You got it, Brooklyn. And then he comes here and barely plays. Again, he had 28 games across 2015, 2016, and then 2017-18. He had a break in the middle there. Did play in 6 playoff games, which is, I think he's the first of the guys we've talked about here to actually get into some playoff games, which again is funny considering what his previous playoff experience was like. He did have 1 goal for the Islanders, 5 assists in those 28 games. But he was basically just a call-up guy. Like, that was my recollection of Steve Bernier, was like, somebody's hurt. Well, I guess they're calling up Steve Bernier. But it felt like he got called up every week because it's the Islanders and somebody's always getting hurt, right?
Yeah. He was just like in the organization, it felt like, for so much longer than his stats would tell you. Like, if you were to ask me before looking it up, how many games does Steve Bernier play for the Islanders and Sound Tigers, I would have told you like a combined maybe like 120 for the Islanders and another 100 for Bridgeport.
Felt like that.
Turns out he played a lot of games for Bridgeport and not that many games for the Islanders. And this was a former first-round pick, who, as you said, kind of his career gets dark clouded because of that trade. He did stick around with the Devils, but the sad part about that hit was he was a bit part player for the Devils that season, and he got called up for the playoffs, and he played well in the playoffs. Like he had a couple goals. I think he played every game for New Jersey in that playoff run, which of course is one of our favorites as Islander fans because they knocked out the Rangers. He had like 7 points, really good bottom 6 player, but he did that, and that I think that kind of just cast him in a different light. But the season before he comes to the Islanders, like he played well in Jersey, 16 goals, another 16 assists, and he comes to the Islanders, you're thinking, wow, this is, once again, Garth Snow finding a guy who's got some pedigree, going to be hungry, maybe his last chance, and it just didn't work out. He was so unremarkable during his time with the Islanders. He was really good with Bridgeport. It seems, at least by the numbers, but so unremarkable with the Islanders. And it's so weird because he really did have, unlike Bracken Kearns, like this guy came into the NHL with a big time pedigree. He was a first round pick from the Sharks. He was traded for he was like the main piece when the Sharks traded for
Brian
Campbell from the Sabres. It was looked as like a really good hockey trade for both teams. The Sharks get their guy, the Sabres get a young guy and a first round pick and a player like Bernier, who's supposed to be, like a surefire NHLer. And it just didn't go that way. And he was actually he ends up in Vancouver, and he's included with Michael Grabner in a trade to the Florida Panthers, which I think people forget that Grabner, when the Islanders picked up Grabner, I mean, I forget a lot too. They weren't picking him up from Vancouver.
No.
He got traded to Florida along with Bernier for Keith Ballard. And the Panthers waived him basically right after camp, and that's when the Islanders picked him up. Yeah,
that's exactly what happened. Yeah,
exactly what happened. And so, it was, between Bernier, Bracken Kearns, and Michael Grabner, three guys who are sort of connected in my own twisted way, but one of them really worked out. One of them did not even come close to working out, and one of them is so forgettable that you'd probably think that Bracken Kearns on our long list of weird Islanders would be one of the least likely to be picked, but I wanted to put him next to Bernier.
Yeah, Bernier's an interesting one. Another funny thing I found while doing this research is that a lot of the links that I found when I did Google searches were to stories that I wrote. And apparently I called signing Steve Bernier at the end of camp like finding pennies at the bottom of your trick-or-treat basket. Because it's like, what are these here for? Why are these here? I don't understand. That's a pretty good line, I thought. I don't remember ever writing that, but here we are. Bernier is one of those guys that just, through no fault of his own, I got to hate because he kept getting called up from Bridgeport instead of like other guys. Like I feel like, they could have called up maybe Josh Hosang or Michael Dow Cole or whoever it was at the time. And they kept calling up Bernier because he was like the sort of defensively responsible guy, veteran guy they could call up and not have to worry about him. Will, do you have any favorite Bridgeport call-up guys that you for lack of a better word, almost resent because they kept coming up instead of like other players that maybe, you would rather see play than, I don't know, Steve Bernier?
Christopher Gibson of this era comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Like as a guy, and not like, that he was a bad guy or a bad player, but just that like, if I hear Christopher Gibson's name in the conversation, it's for a bad reason. And it turns out, you mentioned before, I think, Mike, that stretch run that they had in the 17-18 season where they were floundering after the trade deadline. And there was, it was making the whole John Tavares saga look that much more tedious and troublesome. And he was one of the guys because Grice was hurt at the time. So Gibson was getting starts at that time. He's, like Bernier is in that circle of guys who I almost remember him as much as a guy being mentioned for just being lurking on the Bridgeport team. And actually, I remember having conversations, I think it was at the bar Montrose by Barclays Center, and just having like late conversations about how, like what they're going to do with Y, some of the players getting hurt, and remembering that Steve Bernier, the guy who scooched the pooch for the Devils a couple years ago, is sitting around in Bridgeport right now. And it was just kind of like, oh yeah, like that was weird. Just even at the time, just remembering that being weird.
That's pretty funny. I will give you another name. Christopher Gibson is a good shout. Usually meant that, a goalie was hurt. So yeah, I didn't come to quite resent him as much as I resented the Islanders for not having a better goalie in the system than Chris Gibson. But I will give you the number one Bridgeport Sound Tiger that I absolutely resented every time they called him up. Another Steven Giunta.
Oh God.
I just became like, come on, really? Giunta again?
Together. That
really?
Was Giunta. God, who was it'll come to me who the fourth member of that fourth line was, but it was like Giunta. It was such a weird hockey line with Giunta, Bernier, and honestly, it's freaking me out to think about it because it's just not what you want. It might have been like, I don't know, it could have been like Tanner Fritz at the time.
Yeah.
Because Bernier stuck around in the organization for 2 more years as like the Bridgeport guy. And once again, I'm thinking, why are you doing this? You're Steve Bernier. Like he can, but it was a very strange career that ended in Bridgeport for Steve Bernier. So yikes. Yeah. Steven Giunta, definitely another one that I was just like, kind of just got tired of seeing.
Yeah. He might get an episode of this show. We'll see. Yeah. My last Steve Bernier fun fact, fought Travis Hamonic not once, but twice. Once while he was with Florida and once with the Devils. So I don't know what the beef there was, but Hamonic's still hanging around. So he won, I guess, that war.
One other thing with Bernier, it shocks me to think about, and I had this like thought as like speaking of galaxy brain thinking, but you did write up, I think the headline is Steve Bernier, 2-way contract for some reason. But further down in the article, you write about how they're trying to figure out the forwards in light of some roster crunches. And you kind of mentioned that this is at the time that Bernier comes to the Islanders. It's also at the time where they're trying to figure out whether or not to send Matt Barzal back to his CHL team. And I wonder if there's another galaxy, and this is a really weird thought, what if, but if Bernier isn't here, does Matt Barzal stick around for necessity purposes and then not get the Calder Trophy? Very unlikely. I think they probably send him back to the CHL anyway, but just to think about.
I remember none of this, but oh my God, could you imagine Barzal missing this because of Steve Bernier? that would have been really bad. But I mean, I guess in a way it kind of worked out, and Bernier being here allowed them to send Barzal back. But I don't know. It's just, he's such a very weird place. And the fact that him and Giunta were on the same team together again makes them almost interchangeable. It's very strange. Okay, we're almost done. We have 2 more to go, and they are my picks. And both of these guys I picked because I was in the building for a couple of momentous occasions for them. And just when I think of the Barclays Center era, I think of these 2 guys again, two dudes that kind of floated in. One guy is still around, believe it or not. My first pick is a defenseman out of Czechia, played a long time, and his name was Marek Zidličky. And if you don't remember Marek Zidličky, it means you're probably pretty young. But I remember this guy, before we get to the Brooklyn section, I remember Zidličky being not a premier offensive defenseman, but sort of like a second or third tier kind of offensive defenseman. I remember when he got traded by the Rangers to Nashville in a deal that brought Mike Dunham to New York. And he kind of made a name for himself amongst those Predators. This is, again, pre-Roman Josi, when the Predators didn't score that much. And Zidličky ended up being a pretty good player for them, scoring-wise on the back end. He ends up getting traded to Minnesota. He ends up getting traded by Minnesota after a while to the Devils. The Islanders end up with a pick here that ends up being goalie Eamon McAdam, who you may remember, he was a prospect for a while. But he ends up getting traded to the Red Wings from the Devils for a 3rd-round pick. He kept getting picked up by these like playoff teams because, again, he could score from the blue line. And then he ends up not signing with the Red Wings and becomes a free agent and signs with the Islanders. Mike, I'm going to kick it to you. I feel like we kind of had Zidličky on our radar for a while there because he seemed like the kind of guy who the Islanders can use. He wasn't like a flashy offensive defenseman. He wasn't like a smooth skating Mark Strider guy like that. But like, this guy could put up points and from the back end, which was kind of a rare skill to have back then.
Yeah. And exactly. I think we really liked him because I think what we looked at him, and maybe we even said it on the podcast, was that they needed somebody to fill that Lubo Wisnowski role again. Because Lubo, his career had come to an end, sadly through concussions, and we were looking for that kind of type of guy, and we're like, oh, this is the kind of guy we can rally around, like Lubo, NHL veteran, someone who I always liked, one of those guys who's just like a random NHL player that you're just like, oh, I really want this guy on the Islanders for some reason. Maybe he had a cool name, good shot from the point. I think if you put Marek Zidličky on the, once again, just remember when I'm recording this, so like right now the Islanders are picking up defensemen like Scott Perunovich and Boquist and D'Angelo, and Dennis Cholowski still playing meaningful minutes for this team. Like if Marek Zidličky showed up at for the shadow team tomorrow. I could see the Islanders being like, can you just, run the power play and it working? Cause he just seemed like that kind of player, a guy who kept things simple, but had offensive chops, through being simple. He had a good shot that he knew he could rely on. The Islanders obviously make the playoffs that season, 2015-16. I think Shedlichky, his numbers kind of undersell what he meant to that team, as well. But he was just like that type of guy who in this era of the NHL, was, you just always wanted this kind of player, just solid enough defenseman who could do a lot. Like, I don't know, like a Tony Ludman kind of guy, just had a tool, and a cool name. And yeah, he was just a really solid NHL player. So I remember being very excited when they got him. He was, it just felt right. It felt right.
Right. Well, the reason it felt right is because they flirted with this guy forever before actually signing him. Like, this was when rumors did actually get out from the Islanders, and it was like, oh, they're talking to Shedlichky, and it was like, oh yeah, that might work. That'd be pretty cool. And he ended up getting signed by them after a while. And I thought it was a lot more, but he ended up playing 53 games for him. I thought he played the whole season, but he didn't really sign until September. Ends up playing 53 games for them, scores 4 goals, 12 assists, 16 points. And what's funny is that he had 4 goals in that season. And I saw him score 2 of them in the same game. I was actually at Barclays Center. I mean, it's harder to tell what's more of a rare event. Will being at JF Berube's first NHL win after sitting on the bench for God knows how long, or me seeing Marek Shedlichky score twice in the same game. It was a 4-0 win over the Devils. I was there with, again, my buddy Gio and his 2 sons, who at the time were really little and are now both taller than me. These guys are both Redwoods now, and this makes me feel like this game happened a lot longer ago than it really did. It was only 2015.
Grabowski to Shedlichky. Let's go, a drive. He scores! The power play had just ended, so that'll be an even strength goal. The final minute of the period.
Better serve to give him a glove.
Shedlichky beats Kincaid, and after all of that, it is 4-0 New York.
I was beside myself that this guy scored twice, and I was trying to explain to the kids, you don't understand. This guy, how this guy is even here, I don't understand. Yeah, it's crazy that he scored against the Devils. It's crazy that he's here. He's been bounced around the league for so long. I've been kind of waiting for this guy to show up with the Islanders, and he scores and he ends up here, and he ends up scoring twice in the same game. That's good. I don't think they really understood what I was saying, but it was a pretty wild moment. And I just will never forget. Never forget where I was sitting. Never forget his celebrations, which were both very yeah. So what do you want? Like, it was just wasn't really a wild celebratory guy, but it was pretty crazy. Just for me personally, that I had come full circle from me knowing about this guy as a Nashville Predator 13 years earlier to now scoring twice for the Islanders. It was a pretty wild ride. Will, do you have any recollection of Marek Shedlichky at all? He wasn't around long. Again, this is all that first year, but I don't know. He kind of had a reputation. I wonder if he kind of came up later on as maybe a guy that Islanders fans should have remembered.
Yeah, again, very much memory hold this guy. But, I watched some of that highlights of the game you were at, and back to me a little bit. I mean, how many minutes did he get in that year? Enough to make a little bit of an impact in terms of just getting a taste of the team and kind of what it was about and what the sport was about. But he was, you saw shadows of what was a fun player to watch as a defenseman.
Yeah. And again, he scored in the playoffs. So, I just found this guy really fun. And again, he was here when an Islanders Devils connection wasn't quite as forged as it would be. Although I guess we were just talking about another previous Devil too. Mike, do you have any Marek Shedlichky members? I don't remember talking about him that much in that season of the podcast, although it was 9 years ago. And I guarantee I talked about the game I saw where he scored the 2 goals. I think we probably just more laughed it off than anything else. But I mean, did you memory hold Shedlichky?
My memory of him is just being, as we were saying, just being happy to have him, because it just felt, like I said, it felt right. Felt like a guy who I've always kind of liked from afar. And you just don't get those guys. He in the same vein, I always liked Joni Pitkanen. Do you remember Joni Pitkanen? I always wanted the Islanders to get Joni Pitkanen, and they never got him. And you just have your guys that one that I really liked before they picked him up, and he ended up there. Well, two of them actually were Brendan Witt and Andy Sutton. And I just remember thinking, wow, that's so cool that I really like these guys, and they ended up on the Islanders. And yeah, Zidlichky was kind of like that in his own way. So yeah, I'm kind of just grateful that he came to the island, even though it was a short stint, but it was a good season. And he was also really, I feel like that Devils career, he just fit in perfectly with them too.
Yes.
In a very Devils way. So
he was also on that finals team, I should say, by the way.
Yes,
that
he was.
Bernier was on, and yeah, no, he did. He was very much. I mean, even looks like a guy that Lou Lamoriello would have, smuggled out from behind the Iron Curtain 20 years earlier. Like, he just has that look about him, very stern faced, but a guy who was really, really talented. Okay, we have come to our final Brooklyn Islander, and if you are still with us, congratulations. You have shown the kind of dedication that we all showed when the Islanders moved to Brooklyn, and we kept on going to the games, which I mean, honestly, we didn't talk about that much because we had so many players to get to, but I thought the experience was fine there. I always knew kind of where to sit to get a good view of things. Like we said before, tickets were dirt cheap. It was a quick subway ride in and out, and sometimes I still kind of miss it. I mean, I've only been to a couple of games at UBS Arena. It's quite an ordeal to get there from New Jersey. But I have a lot of nostalgia for that era that I really like. I didn't like the headaches and the craziness, and as soon as they played there, it was like, okay, how quickly can these guys get out of there? And it was a source of great stress for Mike and I during those first early years of the podcast. But in terms of the actual game, I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty cool, and obviously it was able to bring new people into the Islanders, like Will and his friends, who got to watch them while they were playing in Brooklyn, which is can't be discounted. Like there are new fans of the Island. There are fans of the Islanders right now that got into them while the team was playing at Barclays Center, and they might not be fans. Have you thought of that, Will? Have you thought of would you think your fandom would be different had the team never played in Barclays Center?
Absolutely. I mean, to be frank about it, I became a fan Fight Night. Fight Night really was what got me in.
Oh yeah.
But Brooklyn was really what got me into actually following the team, actually getting day in, day out. Because Fight Night, by the way, was the first time in my recollection that I remember them actually getting airtime on ESPN on Sports Center. But to then have a situation where, for a lot of people, it's as accessible or as inaccessible as they were for a lot of the people on the island. For a short window of time there, the Islanders had this weird time and a place thing for people that lived in the area. Right. That could get to games cheaply, that you could go, to a game and then take the one train and go to offsite afterwards, because it was a pretty quick ride from Barclays Center to Lower Manhattan on the one train there. There was just so many neat little things that were kind of happening all at the same time, and really kind of all came to a culmination of the split season era and the good vibes era, which did overlap with Barclays and kind of all ended on a positive note in some ways.
Yeah, a lot of people look at this as kind of a dark era, but to me, I had a good time, and yeah, it did give them a bit of cachet for just a tiny bit of time. It did make them seem kind of cool for just a brief moment.
And they beat the Rangers. They were They beat the Rangers 9 out of 10 games that they played in Barclays Center. It's very important.
That was the best.
Yeah. That was the funniest part, was that their record at Barclays was really good, even though the players apparently all hated playing there.
It was they probably just were getting all their anger out. Yeah, that was when Halak just owned Lundqvist. Yeah. It was hilarious.
Oh yeah.
I just realized something, and I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't bring it up to bring it back to Marek Zidlichky for one more second before we move on to our final Islander here. Is that we obviously hold that 2011-12 Devils team in really high regard for what they did to the Rangers that season. The Rangers win I think the Rangers win the Stanley Cup if the Devils don't beat them. So thank you to Adam Henrique. But that outside of Adam Henrique, who's an honorary Islander, that team, that Devils team, had 7 players who would go on to be Islanders. Zidlichky, Bernier, Travis Zajac, Andy Green, Zach Parise, and Eric Bolton was another one. So yeah, there were 7 of them, and obviously Lou.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of Islander. They're like the next version of that Oilers team we always talk about, the 05-06 Oilers team that had a million guys on it.
The 05-06 Oilers team is like the closest the Islanders have ever come to a Stanley Cup final since 1984. But yeah, that's cool. Wow, that's pretty crazy. I mean, I'm not surprised because, like, what are they? They're local guys who had a lot of success in the playoffs. So why wouldn't you sign those guys?
Oh, Steven Gianta was the other one. Sorry.
My gosh,
yeah. So
right. But that's kind of crazy. 7 guys from the same team. So, and no wonder it feels like those guys are always around. But thank you, Mike. That is important to note. Okay, but we are at our final Weird Islander of the Brooklyn era. And again, thank you so much for spending what is definitely going to be the longest episode we've ever done of this show. But I think it's been worth it because we've covered a lot. Even beyond the guys we were talking about, we talked about a lot of other guys as well. And I think we're really paying a quality tribute to that era that is shouldn't be forgotten. But we would be remiss if we did not mention as our final Brooklyn related Islander, the one and only Cole Bardreau. Cole Bardreau still playing with the Islanders. He's currently the captain of the Bridgeport Islanders, but if you've been around long enough, you remember him as an undrafted guy, kind of hung around the Flyers organization for a while, was signed by the Islanders, made no ripple or anything at all, just an AHL guy, ends up getting called up in the 2019 season during a time in which the Islanders were white hot. I don't know how many games or whatever they won in a row. What was it, 15 games or 17 games undefeated, something along those lines. It was a crazy time. This was obviously, they went on to, this was the bubble year, so they would fall apart and then pick things up back in the bubble. But this was at a time period when they were super hot, and it was November 15th, 2019. Bardreau was called up for whatever reason, and he ends up in the game against the Ottawa Senators, and he's awarded a penalty shot. And he becomes the first ever New York Islander to score his first NHL goal on a penalty shot.
Moment you dream about as a kid growing up trying to play in the NHL, and he scores! Cole Bardreau takes center stage, a penalty shot goal for his first in the National Hockey League.
5-hole shot, so learned some lessons along the way, I guess, and look how happy everybody is for him. Career minor leaguer, never got a chance with the Flyers. Centerman knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was going 5-hole all the way, deflected off the right, inside of the right pad. He's got his head up, and there's the shot. And a little bit of luck possibly, but you know what? He deserved the goal. He's had opportunities, and he's worked hard. And what a big moment for him and his family.
I was in the building for this. I was there, and I could not believe what I was seeing. I couldn't believe they won that game because they kept on winning. They refused to lose. And it was pretty wild. And I mean, of all the moments, Brooklyn had some big moments. Obviously, the Tavares double overtime goal against Florida is the biggest.
Mosel's going to try to step back into Tavares. Stop, shoots, big save by the wall. Rebounds again. In Brooklyn, the Islanders have finally won a series.
You had the Hickey overtime goal in that same series.
Back, looks for traffic, throws one that changes direction. Luongo the save, and the rebound ends up in the corner.
Oh boy, that was a great save by Luongo as you saw it just at the last second.
Centering feed, Hickey, he scores! Thomas Hickey with the winner!
You had a bunch of big time games that happened in that building, and honestly, to me, and I don't think I'm crazy for saying this, I think the Cole Bardreau moment is probably right up there in terms of like, holy shit, that happened in Brooklyn in this short time period that this team played in Brooklyn. This guy got called up out of nowhere and scores his first, and still to this day, only NHL goal on a penalty shot. Also, it is worth pointing out that this man, in his 3 call-ups with the Islanders, wore 3 different numbers, 32, 42, and 54, which is also pretty rare. Will, what do you remember about this game? This was in 2019. You were in the thick of it at that point. Were you there maybe too? Were we sitting on opposite sides of the arena?
I was not there, but I was watching that from home, and that was, I mean, that's like you said. I think one of the last, the last, when you think about it, great moments that that arena had for the team, and really, I think too, it's like, I think of it as like this own little like mini era of like the split season era where you saw things coming together, and you saw sort of the like light on the horizon that is like this team kind of figuring things out, kind of having plans both on the ice and off the ice, obviously, but like and had plenty of moments. The other moment of this time period too that is like a regular season moment too is the poke check happened at
against the Penguins.
Barzal tried to dish it over. It came to Kessel, and it's Crosby on a breakaway. Sidney Crosby for the win on Grice. Poke checked away by Thomas Grice all the way out of the zone.
Who's the happiest guy on the ice there, Brendan? Not Thomas Grice. It's Matt Barzal, who played a soft pass into the neutrals or in the front of the net.
Yes, against the Penguins. That was a great one. I was at the game. I was there for that. But this one I was watching from home. And I mean, I don't think actually I could really remember of another time before this that I had seen a penalty shot for the Islanders other than just watching the highlights of 2002. But I mean, absolute just feel good moment. Like I think just not even just for the team and where it was going, just the player. Like, and obviously, like you'll get into, it's that sort of set up for, I guess, a future where you kind of would start to ask yourself, where's Cole Bardreau? But nonetheless, like I think like sometimes that's like the best thing about this sport and any real sport is like just finding these like little one-off like magical moments where a guy can have like a penalty shot that like is the game difference maker in this one. So I mean, just fun, like a fun time. I just have nothing but great memories of being there in the building at that time and knowing what was kind of to come. And then, like that whole that season too, just like the way that they played and, and it even, sprinkle on this, it's great.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's so funny that they were so white hot and then in January just couldn't buy a win and then emerged on the other side of the pandemic in a bubble and they couldn't lose. They just became just a buzzsaw. I know we talked about Bardreau a lot that season on the podcast, but like my only, and Will is right. Like this is a great feel good story, but like my only kind of, I guess, dark lining to this was I thought Bardreau was going to be kind of more of a part of the team. I was surprised that, he was just sent down not very soon, but like by the, he was sent down shortly after this and he's never really come back up again. I think he may have gotten one other game. He's only played 11 games with the Islanders. Oh yeah. He had one game in 2023, but he played 10 games in the 1920 season. And that's been it. Again, he's been a great captain apparently for Bridgeport. It's been a tough season down there, obviously, but like, did you feel that this guy maybe had some longevity possibly with the Islanders, or would you rather have him just going to be this one hit wonder basically?
I thought he was going to, but now looking back on it, I'm kind of happy with how this story has kind of just played out, and it was it's he kind of, I thought he would be like a Steve Gianta type, where he'd probably play 12 to 20 games a season for the Islanders and just be that bottom six call up guy, and it just didn't work out that way. But as you said, like that, I know that season ended up being so weird for world reasons, but I'll never forget where I was in at a bar with my dad and brother in Lynbrook watching that game and just trying to wrap my head around it. It was tough, but you just felt like if Cole Bardreau is scoring his first NHL goal on a penalty shot, like the Islanders, like they might just win the Stanley Cup or something. And just in that moment, and just having that in your head at that moment, it felt great. But obviously, things didn't go that way. But as you said, he's been with Bridgeport since then, and I think he'll be the end up being like someone who's just part of the furniture with the Sound Tigers now, and is just there forever.
Yeah, sounds about right. He probably will be that guy. So, yeah. So I think we've done a good job here. putting together a full starting lineup plus the extra forward to call up. I guess would that be Cole Bardreau? Will, this has been a lot of fun. I hope you've had a lot of fun. Keep doing what you're doing with the meetup in NYC. Again, you're a lifeline to people, but we cannot let you go before hearing all of your favorite places to eat pizza outside of Barclays Center. how many different pizzerias you've eaten there?
I have a lot of pizza thoughts. I think pizzas are like, they are actually, if you live in the city, they're a public trust. It's like the best, when everybody asks you what the best pizza spot is, your answer should spiritually always be, it's the one that's like closest to me in my neighborhood that serves myself and the community. There's a chain, Artichoke Pizza, and there is one that I was like kind of a pretty frequent stop after games. Whether the first year, I think I tried it for the first time because I came off the train going back and forth to the island to get to Barclays, and I would go to there. And certainly when I was living there, every now and then, if I was near Barclays, I would go to that pizzeria. And Artichoke's still around.
I'm pretty sure I've eaten one of them. Yeah.
If you want to try something, if you want to get a nice sit down experience, if you're ever in off of Franklin Avenue in Crown Heights, where I used to live, Borboncino is really great, and that's a good neighborhood spot, and it's a good date spot. Nice place to just sit and have a good pizza. But like I said, like pizza is just the best one. The best pizzeria in the world is the one closest to you, and cherish it the way I cherished the Islanders when they were playing in Brooklyn. And if you're listening, and by the way, if you're a fan that's on the island, of course, like if you're listening to this and listening to me gush about the Brooklyn experience, I do sincerely from the bottom of my heart apologize.
But nothing to apologize for. With the things we all love, Islanders and pizza. That's what our lives are. I will ask you one last pizza question. Did you ever see Garth Snow at Patsy's Pizza behind Barclays Center, because he was known to frequent that place?
I did not ever see. I did. I will tell you this story. I used to. So my running route. Oh, this is a weird, funny memory. I used to run. So it was basically a perfect 5K if I ran from my house to the flagpole that was in front of Barclays and then ran back. So I was, when I would like go and jog on my off days, I would go to make that run, and I would used to hit the flagpole because it used to be still to this day, I think that flagpole was the same flagpole that they flew that was standing outside of Ebbets Field.
Oh, wow.
So I always thought that was really cool. And I always try to make a point of, if I was going on my morning run, I would go at that. And I did that one day and saw Barry Trotz entering Barclays Center. It was just like around like 11 or 12 in the middle of the day. And first off, I didn't have it was like the one time I decided I'm not going to keep my phone on an armband, which I hated myself for. I never left on a run without my phone, because I was like, the one thing I could have at least done was take a selfie of something. And I was obviously running and jogging through Brooklyn and seeing Barry Trotz with his Starbucks coffee getting into Barclays Center and the press entrance. And I didn't know what else to say. And I just like panicked and I said, "Thank you, Barry. I love you." And just kept running. And he kind of like, he had a, what? And then he looked and he saw me and he said, "Oh yeah, let's go Islanders," or something like that. And he didn't know what to say. And I regretted myself for thinking of only that to say. But in hindsight, I think that was like the perfect thing for me to say to Barry Trotz.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's an amazing story that you just saw. The coach loves coffee. We knew that. And you saw him in his natural element. That's amazing.
Oh man.
I go through that same regret every time I go to a comic book convention and I meet somebody and I say stuff and then I walk away and 5 minutes later I'm like, why did I say that? Why didn't I say something normal? I don't understand. That's amazing. Will, I hope you've had a lot of fun. This has been a great time, and we'll get you on again to talk Jason Chimera.
Oh, please. Yeah. Like I said, big fan. And at this point I'll hang up and listen.
Well, thanks a lot. Oh, wait, don't hang up yet. So if people are in the NYC area, how can they get in contact with you guys, and where can they find out where your next meetups are going to be?
Well, we're on Instagram. If you just search Isles Meetup NYC on Twitter, the Everything app now, or Instagram. I think we're kind of more so on Instagram, but we'll be putting stuff out. And I think we're, like I said, we're kind of on a hiatus because a lot of us have had some life changes go on. But I think especially things are aligning right now that maybe we'll plan something out. So stay tuned, keep an eye on that on the socials. But yeah, just Isles Meetup NYC.
Definitely. So yeah, make sure you follow Isles Meetups NYC on Instagram. Cool. Michael Leboff, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
The Big Lebowski with 2 E's.
Follow Mike at the Big Lebowski. We've been talking a long time about Brooklyn. This is such a weird era for this team, but it fits almost perfectly with the rest of their history. Do you have any final thoughts about whatever? I mean, how long was it? It was like 3 or 4 years, right? Where they played in Brooklyn, and it was a lot of ups and downs, but I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in there too.
Yeah, there was. And I just think that it's very typical of the Islanders and the Islander fan experience of that when you think about the Brooklyn, and most people make fun of it because of the sight lines and whatever, there's just so much more to it. And there's so much more context and nuance that people just never care to listen to or find out on their own. And when you recall these kind of stories, even with players like Steve Bernier or JF Berube, you think back to like how weird it was, and just how, we all know that the Islanders aren't here without Barclays Center still. So it's in a weird way, it's like this era that I kind of compartmentalize out of my head. And also am so grateful for at the same time. So I always do go back to it. It's a very strange era in a very strange history of a team. And these guys were a part of it.
Definitely. As weird as that sounds. I agree. But yeah, it's like I said, an era I look fondly back on, even though it was kind of frustrating at the time. But I mean, UBS Arena is a step up in every way possible. But again, there are elements of Brooklyn that I will miss. It's been a long episode. Sign up at patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety. You know the whole drill. Our theme song is Knuckles by Bjorn Falk. Read Lighthouse Hockey every single day. We're part of the Fans First Sports Network. Shop IceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. And until next time, keep the Islanders weird. Thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you later.